Have you ever felt like an outsider, wondering if you'd ever truly belong? Or maybe you've faced tough times, unsure if things would ever get better. If so, you're not alone, and the story we're about to dive into might just be exactly what you need to hear. Let's talk about Ruth, one of the most incredible women in the Bible. Her story is like a blockbuster movie. It's got everything: tragedy, love, bravery, and an ending that'll blow your mind. Picture this: Israel is going through some rough times. There's not enough food to go around, people are struggling, and it seems like everyone's forgotten about God. It's in this mess that we meet Ruth, a young woman from Moab, who's about to go on the journey of a lifetime. Now you might be thinking, why should I care about some woman who lived thousands of years ago? Well, hold on to your seats, because Ruth's story is about to show us how God can take our messiest situations and turn them into something beautiful. We're talking rags to riches, outsider to insider, and hopelessness to a legacy that changed the world. So are you ready to discover how a foreign widow became one of the most important women in the Bible? Want to find out what her story can teach us about faith, love, and never giving up? Then stick around, because we're about to unpack the amazing story of Ruth, and trust me, it's going to be one wild ride. Get ready to see how God works in mysterious ways, how one person's faithfulness can change history, and how love can conquer all obstacles. This isn't just some dusty old tale. It's a story that's going to challenge you, inspire you, and maybe even change the way you see your own life. So let's jump in and discover why Ruth's story has captivated people for thousands of years, and why it's still incredibly relevant for us today. Our story begins in the land of Moab, a nation with a complex history of conflict and kinship with Israel. The Moabites, descendants of Lot, were often at odds with their Israelite neighbors. It's in this foreign land that we first encounter Ruth, a young woman likely raised in the polytheistic traditions of her people. The Bible doesn't provide extensive details about Ruth's early life, but we can infer that she was raised in a culture vastly different from the monotheistic faith of Israel. Imagine a young Ruth, perhaps curious about the beliefs of her Israelite neighbors, yet firmly rooted in the customs of her own people. Enter Elimelech, a man from Bethlehem in Judah, who journeys to Moab with his wife Naomi and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, seeking refuge from a severe famine. It's a desperate move, leaving the promised land for a foreign territory, but one driven by the basic need for survival. In time, Mahlon takes Ruth as his wife, while his brother Chilion marries another Moabite woman named Orpah. The Bible is silent on the details of Ruth and Mahlon's courtship and wedding, but we can imagine the cultural challenges they might have faced. A union between an Israelite and a Moabite was unconventional, to say the least. During their marriage, it's likely that Ruth was exposed to the faith of Israel. The book of Ruth later reveals her deep commitment to the God of Israel, suggesting that her time with Mahlon had a profound impact on her spiritual journey. However, their happiness was to be short-lived. In a tragic turn of events, Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi a widow in a foreign land. Then, in what must have been a devastating blow, both Mahlon and Chilion also pass away, leaving not one, but three widows: Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. In ancient times, the plight of a widow was often desperate, but to be a widow in a foreign land was even more precarious. Ruth's world had been turned upside down, and the choices she would make next would alter the course of her life, and indeed, the course of history. The scene is set with profound grief and uncertainty. Three widows, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, stand at a crossroads, their futures hanging in the balance. The loss of their husbands has left them vulnerable in a society where a woman's security often depended on male protection and provision. Naomi, burdened by sorrow and perhaps feeling the weight of guilt for leaving her homeland, decides to return to Bethlehem. She's heard that the Lord has visited his people and ended the famine. With nothing left for her in Moab, she prepares for the journey back to Judah. In a moment of selfless love, Naomi urges her daughters-in-law to return to their mothers' homes. She blesses them, saying, "May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Ruth 1:8. Naomi's words reveal the depth of affection that had grown between these women, transcending cultural barriers. What follows is one of the most poignant scenes in Scripture. Orpah, after much weeping, kisses Naomi goodbye and returns to her people. But Ruth clings to Naomi, refusing to leave her side. In face of Naomi's insistence, Ruth utters words that have echoed through the ages. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth 1:16-17. This declaration is more than just a pledge of loyalty to a mother-in-law. It's a profound statement of faith and commitment. Ruth is not only choosing to accompany Naomi, she's choosing to adopt Naomi's God, people, and way of life. She's leaving behind everything familiar, her homeland, her family, her gods, to venture into the unknown with Naomi. Ruth's decision is remarkable for its courage and selflessness. As a Moabite in Israel, she would likely face prejudice and hardship. Yet her love for Naomi and her newfound faith in the God of Israel compel her forward. This moment of decision showcases Ruth's extraordinary character, her loyalty, her bravery, and her willingness to sacrifice for love. In Ruth's pledge, we see a foreshadowing of the kind of commitment God desires from his people. Her words echo the covenant loyalty that God shows to Israel and that he calls Israel to show in return. Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi becomes a powerful metaphor for faithfulness to God himself. As Naomi and Ruth set out on the road to Bethlehem, they carry with them grief and uncertainty. But they also carry hope, hope in the God who provides and in the strength of their bond. Little do they know that this journey is just the beginning of an incredible story of redemption and restoration. The road from Moab to Bethlehem stretches before Ruth and Naomi, a path spanning not just physical distance, but cultural and spiritual divides. This journey, likely around 50 miles, would have taken several days on foot, traversing rugged terrain and crossing the Jordan River. Imagine these two women, bonded by loss and love, making their way across the landscape. Naomi, older and grief-stricken, perhaps leaning on Ruth for support. And Ruth, stepping into a new world with each footfall, her commitment to Naomi and to the God of Israel guiding her forward. As they travel, we can envision the conversations they might have had. Perhaps Naomi shared stories of Bethlehem, of the God of Israel, and of the customs Ruth would need to learn. Maybe Ruth asked questions, eager to understand the faith she had chosen to embrace. This journey was not just a physical relocation, but a spiritual pilgrimage for Ruth. The Bible doesn't detail their journey, but we can imagine the challenges they faced. Two women traveling alone would have been vulnerable to dangers on the road. They likely relied on the hospitality of strangers for food and shelter. Every step would have been a testament to their faith and determination. As they neared Bethlehem, the landscape would have changed. The arid regions giving way to the more fertile hills of Judah. For Naomi, it was a bittersweet homecoming. For Ruth, it was stepping into a new world, filled with uncertainty but also possibility. Their arrival in Bethlehem causes quite a stir. The scripture tells us the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" Ruth 1:19. Naomi's response is telling, "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." Ruth 1:20. Naomi's words reveal the depth of her pain and loss. She left Bethlehem full, with a husband and 2 sons, and returns empty save for her faithful daughter-in-law. Yet in her grief, Naomi still acknowledges God's sovereignty, referring to him as the Almighty. For Ruth, this moment of arrival must have been daunting. She stands beside her mother-in-law, a foreigner in a strange land, unknown and possibly unwelcome, yet she remains steadfast, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Their arrival in Bethlehem coincides with the beginning of the barley harvest.